All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for everybody for attending. Let's get to it. I guess, Simon, you want to move the slide forward? All right. I thought maybe it'd be good to just give a quick overview of what Chronosphere. So Chronosphere is a single tenant SaaS observability platform that's purpose built for cloud native. It's 100% open source compatible and is built on a highly scalable data store. It's basically built on M3DB, which is the founders of our company came from Uber, and that's what they built there to have their monitoring platform. At the center of our platform is this control plane that allows you to do things like analyze and shape your data. And that's really where we're going to spend our time today and deep dive into how this helps you analyze and shape your data, and also helps you justify using a data-driven approach to understanding the value of your metrics and the value they deliver within to your organization. So Simon, I want you to change to the next slide. Yeah. So just to kind of set up the problem here, I think this is a time-tested problem, right? So everybody knows that there's observability or monitoring data that is not very useful, but the problem is that it's difficult to identify and it's time consuming. And so while costs rise, and with things like cloud native causing that to happen exponentially, it's really hard to do that. So, the central observability team is trying to control costs. The developers are trying to do other things. They think all their data is important, and they don't really have the time to want to go look at that and spend the time doing reduction projects. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Simon, you want to add anything, or do you want to jump right in? You're on mute still.
Yeah. No, sorry. I'm going to talk a little bit about this before we get into the demo. I figured maybe we can go to this point. We'll get into this, and then I'll make some comments.
Sure. So what we'll do demo today is we're going to show you how to, start with the table stakes of eliminating waste by identifying unused metrics. And that's the starting point of all this, right? It's also more than that, though, right? It's understanding what the cost versus utility of each metric is and how to make smarter shaping decisions. There's some nuance to this, and Chronosphere provides some capabilities that help you do that. We're also going to show you how this helps reduce the need to make trade-offs, right? So if you can reduce your volumes, optimize your data, then you can start to have deeper visibility in things. And then we'll kind of wrap it up with how this gives you this data-driven case for justifying your observability spend. Because as I said, you can kind of quantify the cost and the value your metrics and data are delivering, and use that as information to help you make a case for the value of the data within your observability tool.
All right. I think we're ready to get into our whole demo here. We're actually going to go back one dashboard real quick. I apologize. Okay, so like Scott was saying, these are stories we hear often. Their observability teams and developers have this kind of relationship where one side, I need to understand what my application is doing, and the other side is, well, I need to also have control over the data that I'm ingesting and how much this is costing me. This is hard to maintain because there's not a lot of transparency around where data is coming from, what data is valuable, what changes should be made to keep people happy and have developers with all of their data, and also, again, keeping costs low and things performant. So Chronosphere has tools put in place that kind of let everybody be in harmony with having to firefight and play traffic cop and figuring out where can I cut things back, who's producing what. The dashboard on the screen here is an example of this transparency. So this is an out-of-the-box dashboard that we have that we call our usage dashboard. And what this does is it breaks down metrics, whether they're being ingested, are they being dropped by a policy, what's actually being persisted, and if things are being dropped by a rate limit. So again, trying to look at this from what did I start with, and now what am I storing? This is important because in Chronosphere, we care about the persisted part of the data. That's what we key in on to charge for. So ingestion we welcome, but because we give you all these tools, we want you to kind of be able to justify the decisions you're making, like Scott was alluding to. So you can take information like this and actually break it down however you'd like on a per label basis. So we just took application name here. And you can also understand on a, again, per service, team, application, whatever the case is, how much is being ingested, persisted, dropped and limited. So this is a good way to get a sense of where my spend coming from for my observability solution. And on top of this, we have ways to sort of be proactive about making sure that you're not going past that limit and that you're somewhat future-proofing yourself from having to deal with certain like dimensions of cardinality or accepting maybe metrics that aren't within a policy that you can put in place. A good example of this is what we call quotas. So quotas looks at the same data, but what it's doing is it's letting you put a barrier up that says, hey, metrics coming from a certain source, you get a certain amount of persisted metric rights that you're allowed to use. And it's not meant to be a punishment. It's more so meant to be proactive about understanding, am I getting close to my capacity that I have? And also somewhat delegating some responsibility back to the developers. The tools we're going to show in a second here to actually dig into, say, why is a quota starting to be breached? Are we getting to our threshold? Could be used by either team. So it's kind of up to you to sort of determine who might have some responsibility in this. But to get into that part of the demo, we're looking at this quotas dashboard. It's a metric that we're tracking, thus we can alert on it. So if somebody is starting to get close to their quota limit, like we see on this monitor here, you can send them information that says, you're getting close. Maybe here's like a run book, or here's some tools you can use to sort of analyze what are you making. And then we can use that information to justify some rules and aggregation and policies in place to, say, tone down what we're actually storing. I want to point out two things real quick about the actual alert. One is that alerts in Chronosphere always belong to a team. And they always belong to a set of assets that the team is responsible for, which we call a collection. So this is a service collection. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but the point of this is, if you receive an alert, it's coming from somewhere. Like somebody made this, it belongs to somebody, somebody's responsible for it. And inside of those pages, there can be things like run books or who's on call or who's on the team, so that if you get an alert like this, you kind of have like a breadcrumb trail back if there's no context on why the alert fired. So that's something that we've sort of built into the platform, is just this inherent context. The other thing is, you'll notice on the left-hand side, these are the different services that could trigger this alert. And it seems like there's two in this case. So with this monitor, you can actually put in place individual thresholds and routing policies for each of these. So it makes it managing this stuff a little bit easier. Now back to our whole problem at hand. Maybe we'll take the ordering service as our example. I'm responsible for the ordering service as a developer. I get an alert like this, and either I can go through and try to figure out what's going on, or again, perhaps the responsibilities in the SRE team, however your organization decides to do it. But within Chronosphere, there's some tools to help us figure out why this quota is being crossed. This is going to bring us to our metrics analyzer. And you'll notice that there's a filter here already for the ordering service, the one that crossed the threshold. And if I push play here, this is going to show us a real-time streaming view of all metrics being ingested by Chronosphere, but not yet being persisted, which is key. But what this means is you can use this to get insight into what's even going on, but then use that as a way to make rules that are accurate, and you already understand what you're going to be trying to do. On the left-hand side, these are labels or tags, whatever the syntax you tend to use is. We'll show the unique values of all of them as well, so you can get a sense of the cardinality, and then how often do they appear in the metrics that we see on the left-hand side, which will give us their names and their data points per second, both average and current, that we're ingesting. So if you're doing just general cost accounting, this is really nice. This is also a good way to get maybe a hint about where some of this ingest is coming from, like we see in this instance label. And if you're familiar with Prometheus, you'll probably recognize this one. But then the question is, how do we figure out, is this actually being used? Can we justify this label being such a high cardinality and keeping it, or can we simply make some policies to get rid of it? Which in comes our usage analyzer. This can look at all of the usage of your metrics on two different, in two different ways, one by the metric and one by the label. We'll look at both of these, but to kind of get into what's going on here, we are looking at everybody in the tenant who is querying the metrics, using them on dashboards. Are they configured on dashboards? And breaking this down in a couple ways to sort of make it easy to surface this information. So I could come into here and see, like, what are my most utilized metrics, and use this as a starting point. Now on the other screen, I'm going to just pick one of the metrics that belong to that service to keep it easy. So one of those was our service HTTP request time total. We'll use this as our example metric here. I can see at the top some details in our summary. I can see where is this metric being configured on a dashboard, a monitor. Are there already rules being applied to it in like right now? Are people executing queries against it just directly in our query explorer? And then we score it based on those two variables on top of how many people are actually using it. So this is a really good way, high level, is this actually being useful or not? Are people using this at all? And on the right, there's just for context, what our actual ingestion is here, our data points per second. We then do all of this, but on a per label basis as well. So down below, we break down each label and their contribution to these scores. So I could come into here and do something similar. And sure enough, I find that our instance label at the top here with 34 different dimensions is used absolutely nowhere. So this is a good kind of starting point with like, now I know for sure I can justify making a rule to perhaps say for the ordering service, I maybe never want to see the instance label again. I could put this kind of broad policy in place. And then upon ingestion, every time we ingest metrics from that service, this label and whatever other ones you want to include can get aggregated away. Now, there's a typical, or sorry, there's a different way to look at this too, the label perspective as well. So if we saw that label in the analyzer of what's being ingested, I could also just go to that label and get a similar breakdown, but now with showing me all the metrics where this is existing and are they actually being queried anywhere. So really easy way to look at, say, my utility score. It seems like some of these metrics, this is heavily used, but a lot of them, it's much less frequent. From this point, if I wanted to make a rule here, I could do so. And I could maybe give an example of this. If I come back over to this page and I look at this metric again, we were looking at this one originally. We've already made an aggregation rule in here to figure out, or because we figured out what exactly we're trying to do here. And as an example of what that might look like, we can look at this, this metric down below. You'll notice that there's a whole lot less information on the screen. We took what we learned on the other page and we made an aggregation rule to just aggregate away this instance label among other things. And you'll see that our utility score is about the same, right? It's being used pretty much the same as it was before, but we're now down to around a 20th of ingestion compared to prior. So this is like direct results of what this can actually do. Now, I'm going to kind of demonstrate it like a real world scenario of what this does for performance. But with Chronosphere, this also impacts your cost. So you can kind of think of those hand in hand with us. And one thing I did want to show, though, was our usage details here. So you can get extremely granular with this as well. So it's not just that, we see this as being used somewhere and thus now we think it's valuable. You can actually get into all the dashboards this is configured on, what queries are being run on the dashboards. Do I actually see that label even being used in any of these? You can see them on monitors here, our alerting, any recording rules. If you're bringing those over from Prometheus, we're compatible with those as well. And then our own policies, the drop rules and aggregation rules. This can get into query executions on top of that. So I can look at a timeline of when people are using it. So maybe you see a metric that has a very low score and maybe somebody has used it in this can give you insight into it. Perhaps then you could actually make the decision that I truly don't need this. It was for like a one-off project or something that happened 6 months ago and it hasn't been used since. Same with dashboards, right? How often are people doing this on a dashboard? And then finally, the actual users. So I can even see how often individuals are using this and again, get feedback from this to kind of figure out, is everything that I'm being sent, everything coming from my applications, are people actually going and using the thing? Now, to kind of finish this off here, I wanted to give an example of what this can do for performance. So with Chronosphere, a lot of this is cutting cost. Like I mentioned earlier, we charge for persistent data, but this has a secondary benefit, which is our performance. So I'm going to go to a cluster health dashboard here. This is meant to be representative of how aggregation can impact your dashboard performance. So if we kind of consider these two columns here, so the left-hand column, we're looking at all of the data on the left with an aggregate version of a time series. And on the right-hand side, this is looking at the raw version, but still retaining the instance label among other things. And you might have noticed that the left-hand side loads much faster than the right-hand side. But just to kind of demonstrate, if we look at, say, 2 days worth of data, you'll see on the left-hand side, this took maybe half a second. And on the right-hand side, this is going to continue spinning till it actually loads in the screen. But we're looking at the same exact time series and the same exact data on this page. So this is really one of the benefits that you get from being able to kind of delegate this responsibility and also have full control over it on the server side, and not necessarily having to go back to developers and telling them to change things or downsample, and kind of like letting them be a little bit, less in control of what they're sending you. They get to produce everything that they want to. If they think all of these metrics are valuable, and maybe they are, you now have tools over here to actually figure out if that's the case. And thus you can cut back on cost and also increase performance at the same time.
But this is also self-service too. So, right. So, I mean, I think the thing that's interesting about the quotas that we talked about earlier is that it kind of, it's starting to solve that age-old problem that we talked about at the beginning, right? Now the developers and the engineers that are creating these metrics now have some insight and understanding of how they're impacting the system. And now they're starting to be more thoughtful about it. And that's one of the important things I think around controlling observability costs, is because, they know their data the best, right? So if, especially at the rate that data can grow and how it can explode from a cardinality perspective, having them have some understanding, having them have some guardrails helps to get them thinking about what's important to them, what's not important. And that, that makes the organization together start to focus on this growth problem and not just become a central observability team issue. And, it allows everybody to be more collaborative and, do what's in the best interest and do more with the be smart about how they're shaping their data so that they can build that space into that budget to be able to do more visibility, more custom metrics, more experiments and things like that. And it's giving those development teams who typically have just been, the creators and not the understanders of how that, or the controllers, it gives them that control now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point, Scott. And this does conclude the actual demonstration part of it. We are sticking around for questions. So happy to answer any in the chat if there are any, or if you want to follow up with us as well, that's also perfectly fine.
While we're waiting, another area I think that's interesting to think about is, it's identifying unused things is easy, right? It's easier. The nuance in this comes into within our control plane. I don't know if you want to go back to the demo quickly while we wait.
Yeah,
go into
absolutely.
Within the metrics usage analyzer, it gives you a number of ways to look at your data, right? It's not just about least valuable or labels or not used. It's about, what's my highest persisted, right? What's the most utilized? And it gives you the ability to then dive into those most utilized and say, hey, what can we do to optimize this? It gives you lots of different ways to kind of slice and to look at it and then make, decisions that help you refine the data that's in here to, as as Simon showed you, speed up queries, speed up dashboards, and also optimize for cost and optimize for the business, the needs of the business and the value it delivers.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add on is you're kind of creating a more clean data source for your alerts as well. So we'll see huge amounts of aggregation away from some of the companies we work with, and as a result, almost inherently their alerts become a whole lot more just meaningful because you're not potentially getting them from something that just might not be important at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other aspect of it, the downroad effects of the downstream effects of this is better data for engineers who are trying to solve problems, less frustration, faster performance. You're on call. You want that data and that dashboard to be performant. You want that alert to be accurate. And by taking these steps and having these insights into the data within your system and the control. And again, this isn't just central observability team. Obviously, there's controls here that they control the quota part of it. But it also gives this, it's a self-service thing. So everybody starts to think about this. And again, and going back to, the last point we made is like by having this information, you can now make a justifiable case as to why you need these metrics. So if you are, say, a service team and you're coming up against your quota, you can literally justify by looking at the data and saying, hey, here's the value these are delivering. We've done everything, we've optimized. This is why we need more of the quota, or we need to increase the budget. But it's a thoughtful process and not just a, well, everything's important, so we don't want to get rid of anything just in case. So we got to keep it. And I think the other thing, I don't know if we mentioned, I can't recall, but a lot of these the shaping capabilities that we have are all done dynamically, right? So they can be, you can create them, and you can, if you find a metric that's not being used, or you shape something and then it needs that you actually need that, it's just undoing that rule. So you're not actually having to involve the developers or other development teams to remove those labels or metrics. You can do that dynamically. And as I said, if something changes, you just undo that rule and that data starts coming back in.
And there's a question in the chat from Pete.
Yeah.
If this is referencing what's on the screen right now, I believe we're working on our API to let you kind of extract this if you're thinking of like using this to automate something. Otherwise, the dashboards that we were showing earlier, like these are embedded Grafana. So you could export these. I don't. Perhaps Grafana might have some kind of like report creation thing that's open sourced out on the web. But otherwise, like you can come into here and grab the JSON out of this and export it that way. The data itself, there's no like bulk like CSV export at the moment if we're talking about just getting data out of the backend, but you are able to query as much as you like out of it with no limitations.
Is there a cost associated or limitation with creating rules that ignore data?
There is not. There are no like costs in querying things out, creating any rules, user seats, nothing like that. It is purely the cost of the data that you want to persist inside of Chronosphere. That's the only line item. And there's also no overage model either. So there isn't even a way to incur overages. And that's part of like our philosophy of giving you these tools here and also helping you along the way. So like if you were to become a customer, I see this all the time. We have eyes on when there's unexpected spikes, or maybe there's like a new version pushed or something and more metrics were introduced. Like these are things we keep an eye on our side to also make sure that you're aware when this happens.
Right. I don't see any other questions. So I guess we can close out unless you have any final words, Simon.
I think I'm good,
Okay.
but I appreciate everybody coming and then a couple questions we got.
Can you go back to the slides?
Yes, sir.
And I'll
sorry.
All right. So thank you everybody for joining. Just to give you a heads up, there's another live webinar we're doing with Google Cloud next Thursday. And we'll share how Google Cloud and Chronosphere are working together to deliver, a reliable, performing, cost-effective cloud-native observability and managed Kubernetes. There will be a demo for both sides of Google Cloud and Chronosphere, so that'll be cool. So please visit our website to register. And thank you everybody for being here for this session. This session is recorded. So if you missed any part or want to go back and check it out, you'll receive a link via email to come back on demand. You can also visit the Chronosphere website and under the events and webinars tab to find it in case that gets lost in your inbox. And we also mentioned at the beginning that we're giving away 5 Lego helmets. So Han will be reaching out to the winners via email with instructions for claiming that gift after the webinar. So please keep an eye out for that one. That's an important one. That's a pretty cool gift. So if you don't find the email, just make sure to check your spam folder just to even be sure if we wouldn't want to have anybody miss out on that. Like I said, a really cool gift. So and with that, I think that's it. Thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks all.